All right, everyone, and welcome back to FlashTales. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to dive into some of the biggest questions and theories floating around the Grand Theft Auto community and what they might mean for GTA 6. So, let's start with a fascinating theory that's been making the rounds, the idea that GTA 6 might kick off with a prologue set in the snow. Now, of course, the first thing many people bring up is that the game is set in a fictional version of South Florida, where winter just means really pleasant weather. But the more compelling argument, and the one that many in the community are leaning towards, is that Rockstar has a history of this kind of cold open. Think about it. GTA 5's prologue started in the snow-covered state of North Yankton, a place completely separate from the main map of Los Santos. And look at Red Dead Redemption 2. It also begins in the snow, with the gang freezing in the mountains of Coulter after a botched robbery. So the theory goes that we could be looking at another prologue mission set somewhere up north, far from the sunshine and swamps of the main setting. It would be a classic Rockstar move to set a different tone right at the start, and it's a theory that a lot of fans believe would be a perfect reintroduction to the series. Another conversation that's been bubbling up in the fan community is the focus on the game's incredibly small details. Fans are looking at every element to gauge just how next-gen this new entry will be. One specific detail that got people talking was the realism of the environmental effects, like the way heat from a simple campfire can visibly distort the air around it. At first glance, many saw this as a sign of a truly next-generation engine, something that really pushes the level of immersion. However, it didn't take long for the community's longtime veterans to weigh in with a history lesson. Many fans were quick to point out that this heat distortion effect, while looking great, isn't new to the series at all. In fact, it was a memorable feature in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which came out all the way back in 2004. They noted that the same heat haze effect was used for things like the fire from a flamethrower or the thrusters of the jetpack. So, while the incredible attention to detail is definitely something to be excited about, this particular feature seems to be a welcome return of a classic effect rather than a brand new innovation. It just goes to show how deeply fans are analyzing every single aspect of this upcoming world. Let's move on to a topic that is on every fan's mind: the sheer size and length of the game. Considering how long everyone has been waiting for this next installment, the expectations for the amount of content are sky high. When you look at Rockstar's history, you see a range. Grand Theft Auto 5 had its 69 story missions, while a massive narrative epic like Red Dead Redemption 2 had over 104. So the big question being debated is, where on that scale will Grand Theft Auto 6 land? One of the more creative metrics for game length that has been floated is the idea of a 500 cigarette story. The logic behind this is surprisingly detailed. If you figure an in-game break to smoke a cigarette lasts about 10 minutes, then a storyline of this length would translate to roughly 83 hours of main campaign content. This then spirals into its own humorous tangent about the realism of a 10-minute cigarette, with some joking that it must be a special San Andreas cigarette, while others say theirs only lasts 2 minutes at most. But beneath that funny, granular debate is a serious point that resonates with the fan base. While the exact number of missions is anyone's guess, the sentiment is clear. After more than a decade of waiting, players are hoping for a massive, sprawling story. That 83-hour figure, born from a creative thought exercise, really represents the desire for what they hope will be Rockstar's biggest and most ambitious narrative to date.
Another deep dive the community has been exploring is the level of interactivity we'll have with the world itself. Not just the big things, but the small details. This has led to a fascinating question. Will we be able to physically place objects from our inventory into the game world? In past games, you could often consume items like food or drinks, but you couldn't, for example, take a beer can out of your inventory and just set it down on a table. The question now is whether these small personal objects are just detailed props for cutscenes or part of a much deeper, more interactive gameplay system. This has sparked some really creative theories, with one of the most interesting being tied to rumored convenience store robbery gameplay. The idea is that you might be able to grab something like a 6-pack of soda, not just to consume it, but to physically carry it out. From there, the possibilities branch out in classic Grand Theft Auto fashion. Maybe you could empty the bottles to create makeshift Molotovs for a later job. This line of thinking isn't just limited to bottles. The discussion has also turned to other everyday items like phones. What if you could snatch a phone right out of an NPC's hand during a chase? Perhaps you could even use it as a weapon in a desperate moment. This could open up entirely new systems like the rumored concept of using burner phones to avoid being tracked. Of course, there's also the more grounded perspective. The argument here is that these objects could simply be more detailed props, part of the scenery, to make the world feel more alive, but not part of a revolutionary new system. Still, it's a feature that has story mode editors excited about the potential fun of placing and throwing random items at NPCs, especially with the claims of new unique AI personality systems. For now, it remains a heavily debated topic, with some choosing to keep their expectations low until they can see it for themselves. Another significant theory circulating revolves around how the game will handle its weapon inventory. For years, the Grand Theft Auto series has been famous for the magic pocket system, where your character is essentially a walking armory, able to pull a rocket launcher out of thin air. However, there's a strong belief that Grand Theft Auto 6 might be moving towards a more realistic and grounded system, similar to what we saw in Red Dead Redemption 2. The core of this theory is the idea that you will have to store your larger weapons, like rifles and shotguns, in the trunk of your car. This would fundamentally change the gameplay loop. It would add a new layer of strategy to every encounter. Before a mission or a potential firefight, you'd have to go to your vehicle and deliberately choose your loadout, forcing you to think ahead instead of just reacting. Your personal car would become more than just transportation. It would effectively be your mobile base of operations, the place where you gear up for a job. This system would also introduce a new element of risk and tension. Imagine the feeling of having your go-to car stolen, knowing that your best weapons are still sitting in the trunk. It creates a dynamic where being separated from your vehicle could be a massive penalty, while being close to it could offer a significant perk. This potential change suggests that the days of pulling a minigun out of your back pocket might finally be over, pushing the series in a much more immersive and strategic direction. It's a popular theory because it would create a stronger bond between the player and their personal vehicle, making it a crucial part of their criminal career. Thank you for joining me on another deep dive with FlashTales. We'll be keeping a close eye on all things Grand Theft Auto 6 as more information comes to light. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.